The first morning of training smelled of damp grass, sweat, and the sharp bite of nerves. Recruits lined up in formation, boots planted firmly on the asphalt, the air buzzing with restless anticipation. Among them stood Emily Carter, her frame, lean but unassuming, her brown hair tucked into a neat braid. She clutched her helmet beneath her arm, trying not to notice the sideways glances or the smirks curling across the faces of the taller, bulkier men standing nearby. It wasn't her imagination. They noticed her, and not in the way she had hoped. One whispered something under his breath, and another chuckled. She knew exactly what they saw. A woman who didn't look like she belonged in this world of grit, sweat, and steel. Emily swallowed the sting rising in her throat. She had come here to prove herself, not to crumble under the weight of other people's doubts. The instructor's whistle cut through the air, snapping everyone into silence. "You are here to be broken down and rebuilt," he barked, pacing with sharp, deliberate steps. "If you think you're tough now, forget it. The storm doesn't care how strong you look. The fire doesn't care how much you can lift. Out there, mistakes kill people. You will either earn your place or you'll walk away." His eyes swept over the line, pausing on Emily for a second longer than the others. She felt it like a spotlight. The first drill began. Gear hauling. Each recruit was handed a heavy fire hose, coiled tightly like a suffocating snake. The order was simple: run the length of the field with it slung over your shoulder, then back again. Emily hoisted hers, the thick canvas biting into her collarbone. The weight shocked her at first, heavier than she'd anticipated, but she forced her legs to move. Around her, the men surged forward with grunts and shouts, their bodies built for this. Emily lagged behind within seconds. She heard the laughter before she reached the halfway mark. "Don't trip over it, sweetheart," one shouted. Another called, "Need us to carry it for you?" Their voices burned hotter than the sun overhead. Emily's jaw clenched, her lungs screamed, and her knees trembled, but she pressed forward. Every step was agony, yet surrender was worse. She finished dead last, gasping for breath, her shirt plastered to her back. The instructor gave no sympathy. "Last again, Carter," he said flatly, as if announcing the weather. No scolding, no encouragement, just disappointment sharpened into a blade. Emily nodded silently, though her chest ached with more than exhaustion. Over the next days, the drills grew harsher. Scaling ladders with weighted packs, dragging dummies across gravel, climbing ropes until hands blistered and bled. Each task seemed designed to expose her weakness. And every failure was met with a chorus of sneers. "You'll never last here. She's slowing us down. She should have stayed home," the words carved into her like knives. At night, lying on the thin mattress in the barracks, Emily would stare at the ceiling, her body aching in ways she never thought possible. Doubt whispered in her mind, cruel and persuasive. "Maybe they're right. Maybe you don't belong here." But then something deeper stirred. She thought of her father, who had worked long shifts at the factory, hands scarred and back bent, yet never complained. She thought of her mother, who juggled 2 jobs while raising Emily and her younger brother, instilling in them a belief that hard work mattered more than what anyone thought. Her parents had never had the chance to chase dreams. They were too busy surviving. Emily wanted to do more. She wanted to serve, to be the person people could count on when disaster struck. That calling was louder than the jeers. So while others slept, Emily stayed awake, practicing. She rehearsed knots until her fingers were raw. She lifted sandbags alone in the dim glow of the barracks light. She ran laps in silence, pushing, her lungs to expand, her legs to endure. She didn't need an audience. She needed progress. Each night, she carved away a little more weakness. Her determination didn't erase the ridicule. During a ladder drill, she slipped on a rung and slammed her shin hard enough to leave a bruise the size of a fist. The recruits roared with laughter. "Careful, Carter. Ladders are tricky." Someone jeered. Emily bit her lip so hard it nearly bled. She refused to let them see her cry. But not everyone laughed. One recruit, Marcus, a broad-shouldered man with quiet eyes, watched her differently. He never spoke up during the mockery, but sometimes, when she struggled, she caught him studying her with something like respect. He, too, had been underestimated at times, not for his size, but for his background. He didn't say it, but she felt it. He understood. The instructors, for their part, rarely intervened. In their eyes, the world of rescue was unforgiving. Better she learned to endure criticism now than collapse under pressure later. They offered no comfort, only more drills, more tests, more ways to expose the cracks in every recruit. One scorching afternoon, they introduced the hose drag exercise. Recruits had to haul a charged fire hose, its weight doubled by pressurized water, across the yard. Emily's arms trembled, her boots slid in the mud, and the hose seemed determined to pull her backward. Behind her, laughter echoed once more. Rage flared in her chest. She screamed, not words, but raw defiance, and heaved with everything inside her. Inch by inch, she dragged the beast forward until it finally crossed the finish line. She collapsed onto her knees, chest heaving, arms numb. For a brief moment, the yard went silent. Then one voice muttered, almost grudgingly, "Damn." She actually did it. That night, lying on her mattress, Emily replayed that moment in her mind. For once, their laughter had quieted. It wasn't victory. Not yet, but it was proof. Proof that she could endure, that she could finish what she started, no matter how impossible it seemed. Days turned to weeks. Emily was never the fastest, never the strongest, but she refused to be broken. Every stumble became fuel, every insult a challenge. She learned to silence the noise, to let the mockery slide off her like rain. What mattered wasn't their opinion. What mattered was the quiet fire burning inside her. By the end of training's first phase, Emily hadn't earned their respect. Not yet, but she had earned something more important, her own belief that she belonged. And though no one else saw it, she carried within her the steel that would win. They held an entire team together when the storm came crashing down. The morning began before the sun rose, the air crisp with dew and silence. Emily laced her boots in the dim barracks light, her body sore from yesterday's drills. Her hands were still raw, the blisters on her palms hardened into calluses. She winced as she tightened the laces, but a quiet smile tugged at her lips. Pain meant progress. Pain meant she was still here. The whistle blared outside, shattering the calm. Recruits rushed to formation, boots pounding the pavement. Some groaned, rubbing sleep from their eyes, while others joked loudly to mask their nerves. Emily stood at attention, her face set, though her stomach churned with unease. She knew what the day would bring: more drills designed to push them past their limits, more laughter at her expense when she faltered. The instructor stepped forward, eyes sweeping across the rows. "Today is about precision," he barked. "Strength will only carry you so far. Out there, one mistake costs lives. One slip, one knot tied wrong, one rope rigged poorly, and someone doesn't go home. You're not just training your muscles. You're training your discipline." The words struck something deep inside Emily. While others thrived on raw strength, she had begun to understand the value of details. She couldn't outlift or outrun most of her peers, but she could outthink them, outpractice them, and notice. What they overlooked, the day's drills confirmed it. They were tasked with tying safety knots in record time, securing lines under pressure. Many of the men rushed, eager to show their speed. Ropes slipped through their fingers, knots messy, uneven. Emily, slower and methodical, earned groans of impatience. "You'll never survive in the field at that pace," one sneered. But when the instructor inspected their work, he stopped at Emily's rope. He tugged, pulled, twisted, and finally gave a curt nod. Secure, solid, exactly as it should be. He tossed it back at her and moved on. No praise, just acknowledgement. But it was more than she'd gotten before. Her peers didn't notice. They were too busy laughing as one of them flexed his muscles dramatically. "Hey, Carter, maybe you can tie my shoes next time?" he said with a smirk. She ignored him, but inside, she tucked away the instructor's words like armor. Later that afternoon, they ran a search and rescue simulation. The scenario was simple. Locate a weighted dummy. Victim in a smoke-filled building and drag it to safety. Inside the dark, suffocating structure, visibility was nearly zero. Most recruits panicked, yanking dummies clumsily, banging into walls, wasting precious seconds. Emily dropped low, remembered her training, and counted her steps, sweeping with her hand along the wall until she found the dummy. She looped a rope around it, securing it carefully before dragging it out, inch by steady inch. She finished slower than others, but her dummy was intact, properly secured and positioned for easy evacuation. Others had dragged theirs recklessly, arms and legs snapping against obstacles, a dangerous habit in real life. The instructors noted it. Her peers didn't. To them, speed was the only measure of success. At dinner that night, Emily sat alone. At the far end of the cafeteria, she ate quietly, eyes on her tray, while laughter roared from the center tables. "You see Carter today?" one of them said loudly. Tied knots like she was knitting a sweater. The table erupted. Another mimicked her careful motions, moving in exaggerated slow motion. Emily clenched her fork, forcing herself not to react. The sting was sharp, but she reminded herself of the instructor's nod, of the dummy she had secured flawlessly. They didn't see it, but she did. She was building something stronger than pride. She was building competence. That night, long after lights out, she pulled her rope from under her bunk and practiced again. Overhand knots, figure eights, bowlines over and over until her fingers cramped. In the quiet darkness, the rhythm of the rope became a meditation. She wasn't chasing their approval. She was preparing for the day when approval wouldn't matter, only survival. The weeks wore on, each one chipping away at her body, but sharpening her mind. The physical drills never got easier. Her muscles burned, her lungs screamed, but her endurance grew. She no longer collapsed at the finish line, even if she still came last. What she lacked in brute strength, she replaced with resilience. One day, during a rappelling exercise, the group was tasked with descending a training tower. The instructors emphasized safety checks, but many recruits rushed through them, eager to show off their speed. Emily, as always, double-checked her gear. She spotted a fellow recruit's harness, misaligned, and spoke up. "Your strap isn't secure," she said. He rolled his eyes. "Mind your own business, Carter." But the instructor overheard. He checked and found Emily was right. The strap could have come loose mid-descent. The recruit turned red, the laughter quiet for once. Emily said nothing, but inside she felt vindicated. Details mattered. She had saved him from a dangerous mistake, even if he'd never admit it. Still, the ridicule didn't stop. During endurance runs, she lagged behind, coughing and wheezing. "Dead weight," they muttered. During hose drills, she stumbled, under the strain, and someone whispered, "She's going to get someone killed." At night, doubt crept in again. Was she fooling herself? Was sheer determination enough to carry her through a world built for giants? But every time the questions threatened to overwhelm her, she remembered the rope in her hands, The secure knots, the calm precision. Strength could fail. Panic could kill. But skill could save lives. By the end of the second phase of training, Emily's reputation hadn't changed much. To most, she was still the weak link, the one slowing the group. But quietly, beneath their laughter, she had built a foundation no one else had bothered to. Her endurance was steadier, her hands surer, her instincts sharper. She didn't need them to see it. She just needed to hold on to it. And somewhere, deep inside, she knew, when the real storm came, it wouldn't be the fastest or the strongest who carried the day. It would be the one who noticed the small things, the one who stayed calm when fear made others blind. Emily was ready to be that person. Graduation day arrived beneath a cloudless sky, the parade ground buzzing with pride and exhaustion. Rows of recruits stood in uniform, boots polished to a gleam, helmets tucked neatly under their arms. Families filled the bleachers, waving flags, clapping as names were called. Emily Carter stood among them, her chest swelling with a mix of relief and quiet triumph. She had made it through. She bore the bruises, the blisters, the scars that proved she had survived where so many had doubted her. When her name was read aloud, the applause was polite, but she noticed the difference. Some recruits received thunderous cheers from their families, whistles of admiration from peers. Emily's recognition was quieter, more restrained. She smiled anyway. For her, the victory wasn't in the applause. It was in the badge she now wore proudly against her chest. After the ceremony, her fellow graduates gathered in clusters, slapping each other on the back, making plans to celebrate. Emily lingered. On the edge, watching, her stomach twisting with a familiar ache. The camaraderie others seemed to slip into effortlessly still eluded her. She had spent so long being the target of their ridicule that the bonds between them had formed without her. Her new assignment came quickly. A local field unit known for handling a wide variety of emergencies, fires, floods, rescues. It was considered a solid placement, one where rookies could gain valuable experience under seasoned veterans. When Emily reported for her first day, nerves fluttered in her stomach like restless birds. She wanted desperately to make a good impression, to show she was ready. The station itself was a modest building, its brick walls weathered from years of service. Trucks gleamed in the bays, polished despite the dust that seemed to settle endlessly from the nearby roads. The air smelled faintly of smoke, oil, and coffee. Emily stepped inside, her boots echoing on the tile, and was immediately met with curious glances. "New recruit?" one of the men asked, his tone carrying a hint of skepticism. "Yes, sir," Emily said quickly, offering her hand. "Carter, Emily Carter." The man's handshake was firm, his expression unreadable. "Welcome to the unit. Gear up, we'll put you to work soon enough." As the day wore on, Emily learned quickly that the skepticism didn't fade. Though no one outright mocked her the way recruits had in training, the undercurrent of doubt was still there. She overheard murmurs when she struggled with heavy equipment. She caught sidelong looks when she volunteered for physically demanding tasks. "She'll slow us down. Better keep her out of the thick of it." The words weren't shouted anymore, but whispered, subtle, yet cutting all the same. Emily swallowed her frustration and doubled down on her efforts. When her shifts ended, she stayed behind, studying equipment manuals until she could recall every mechanism blindfolded. She memorized local terrain maps, noting areas prone to flooding, unstable cliffs, and narrow canyon trails where rescues might be needed. While her colleagues relaxed in the lounge or joked over cards, Emily hunched over binders and charts, her pen scratching notes into a worn notebook. One night, Marcus, the quiet recruit from training who had watched her with something like respect, stopped by the table where she sat. "You ever sleep, Carter?" he asked lightly, setting down his tray. Emily looked up, startled, then offered a faint smile. "I'll sleep when I'm good enough not to get someone killed." Marcus chuckled, though his eyes softened. "You're harder on yourself than anyone else here." "Someone has to be," Emily replied simply. It became a pattern. Days filled with drills, ride-alongs, and training exercises with the unit. Nights spent alone with her notebooks, practicing knots until her fingers ached, replaying scenarios in her head until exhaustion finally claimed her. The others noticed her dedication, but not in the way she hoped. "She's too uptight," one said. "Always got her nose in a book." Another added, "Over-prepares for everything. Out in the real world, you don't get time to study." Emily bit back the urge to defend herself. Instead, she let their laughter roll off her and kept working. She knew preparation wasn't a luxury, it was a lifeline. Her first call into the field came 2 weeks later. A small brush fire had broken out on the edge of town, threatening a cluster of abandoned sheds. The veterans treated it like routine, cracking jokes as they geared up. Emily's heart pounded as she pulled on her gear, adrenaline sharpening her senses. At the scene, smoke billowed, heat rippled through the air. Emily stuck close to her team, following orders to the letter. She carried hoses, kept the line steady, and scanned constantly for hazards. When one of the older firefighters nearly stumbled on unstable ground, Emily's shout of warning came quick enough to steady him. He grunted a thanks, but said nothing more. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Emily returned to the station, drenched in sweat, coughing from the smoke, yet more determined than ever. As weeks turned into months, her reputation remained unchanged. To the others, she was reliable enough, but unremarkable, never the star of the group, never the one anyone bragged about. But Emily wasn't chasing glory. She was quietly building her foundation, one drill, one study session, one painstaking repetition at a time. Sometimes, late at night, she wondered if they would ever see her as anything more than the weak link. The loneliness pressed heavy on her chest, but she refused to let it crush her. Respect wasn't given, it was earned. And Emily was willing to wait as long as it took. Her patience, her preparation, her silent endurance, all of it was laying the groundwork. She didn't know it yet, but the moment was coming when everything she had endured, every knot tied in the dark, every map studied, every bruise and blister, would prove not only that she belonged, but that she was destined to lead. The storm arrived without mercy. By dusk, black clouds rolled across the horizon like an invading army, swallowing the last traces of sunlight. Wind tore through the town, rattling windows and bending trees until their branches cracked and fell like bones. Rain came next, sheets of it hammering the ground, filling gutters and turning roads into rivers. Thunder roared overhead, each strike of lightning splitting the sky in violent flashes. At the station, the radios crackled with urgent voices. Reports of flooding poured in from every corner road submerged, homes evacuated, power lines down. But one call silenced the room. A group of hikers had been trapped deep within a canyon when the water surged. "Flash flood," the dispatcher said grimly. "Multiple victims. Roads washed out. Access will be limited." The room fell still for a moment. Everyone knew the canyon. Its narrow walls funneled water into a roaring torrent during storms. Like this, transforming it into a death trap. Reaching those hikers would be nearly impossible. Captain Harris, a grizzled veteran with decades of rescues behind him, snapped into action. "Gear up, we're moving out." Emily's heart thudded in her chest as she pulled on her gear. She had trained for this moment, rehearsed it in her head countless times, but imagining and living it were two very different things. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, sharp and intoxicating. She forced her hands to stay steady as she secured her helmet. The team piled into the truck, the engine roaring as rain battered the windshield. Water streamed down the streets, tires hissing as they cut through the flood. Inside the cab, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Some exchanged clipped words, others stared grimly ahead. Emily sat in silence, every muscle coiled tight. "Keep her out of the way," someone muttered under their breath. "We don't need dead weight tonight." The words stung, but Emily didn't flinch. She had heard worse before. Tonight wasn't about pride. Tonight was about survival errors, her teams, and the strangers waiting in the canyon. When they arrived at the trailhead, the scene was chaos. The dirt path leading into the canyon had become a river of mud, water rushing downhill with ferocious speed. Branches and debris floated past, colliding violently against rocks. Visibility was poor, lightning splitting the sky only long enough to reveal the treacherous landscape ahead. "Radio contact will be spotty down there," Harris warned, raising his voice over the wind. "Stay together. Secure your lines." Number. Mistakes. They moved in single file, headlamps cutting thin beams through the sheets of rain. Emily's boots sank into mud with every step, her pack pulling at her shoulders. The roar of water grew louder as they descended, the canyon walls closing in like jaws. Halfway down, disaster struck. A section of the trail collapsed beneath, the weight of water sending one of the team members tumbling to his knees. His rope snagged on jagged rock, nearly yanking him backward. Shouts erupted as the crew scrambled to secure him. Radios crackled, but static drowned out the words. For a brief moment, confusion reigned. Emily's eyes darted across the scene, her mind snapping into focus. She spotted a safer route along higher ground, partially obscured by brush. She remembered the topographic maps she had studied late at night, the way the terrain sloped near the canyon's east wall. Without hesitation, she called out, "Shift left. Higher ground's more stable." Her voice cut through the storm, sharp and certain. The others hesitated, surprised by her authority. Harris glanced at her, then at the route she indicated. With no time to argue, he barked, "Move." They adjusted course, scrambling upward to firmer footing. The ground held. A fallen firefighter was hauled back to safety, shaken but alive. For a moment, the only sound was the relentless roar of the flood below. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears, but her hands stayed steady. She had made the right call. They pressed on, reaching a narrow ledge overlooking the raging waters. The canyon floor below was unrecognizable, a churning sea of brown, debris-filled water. Stranded on a rocky outcrop in the middle were the hikers, their headlamps flashing desperately. The water surged around them, rising inch by inch. "Damn it," one of the firefighters muttered. "We'll never get them across that." The team argued, voices sharp with fear and frustration. Some wanted to wait for the water to recede. Others suggested setting anchors, but no one could agree. Meanwhile, precious time slipped away, the flood climbing higher. Emily scanned the scene, her training replaying in her mind like a film reel. Rope systems, safety lines, anchor points. She spotted a cluster of sturdy rocks upstream, positioned perfectly to secure a line across the current. Her fingers itched, already knowing the knots, the angles, the sequence required. "We can rig a high line," she said, raising her voice. "Over the storm. Anchor there," she pointed to the rocks, "and run the line across. It's the safest way to ferry them over." Silence followed. The team stared at her, rain dripping from their helmets. "You think you're calling the shots now?" one scoffed. But Harris's eyes lingered on her, calculating. He knew time was running out, and her plan made sense. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Do it." Emily's heart raced. but her hands were steady as she pulled rope from her pack. She moved quickly, looping knots with practiced precision, anchoring them as rain lashed her face. The others watched, skeptical at first, but gradually they began to follow her lead, helping secure the system. When the line was ready, Emily clipped in first. "I'll go," she said firmly. "You?" someone asked incredulously. "Yes." She didn't wait for permission. Securing her harness, she stepped onto the rope, the flood raging beneath her. Every step was a battle, the current spraying her, the line swaying under the force of water, but she moved steadily, deliberately. Her focus narrowed to each handhold, each shift of her weight. Reaching the stranded hikers, she offered them the calm they desperately needed. "One at a time," she instructed. "Stay clipped in. I'll guide you across." Their fear was palpable, but her steady tone anchored them. One by one, she clipped them onto the line and helped them across, shouting encouragement over the storm. The team caught them on the other side, pulling them to safety. When the last hiker crossed, Emily followed, her body aching, her clothes soaked, but her spirit unbroken. She unclipped from the line, landing on solid ground as the team. And survivors collapsed in exhaustion. No one laughed this time. No one doubted. The same recruits who had once mocked her now stared with wide eyes, their respect unspoken but undeniable. Emily caught her breath, scanning the team. They were alive. The hikers were alive. Against all odds, they had pulled it off. And though Harris would take the official lead in the report, everyone there knew who had guided them through the storm. For the first time, Emily felt it not just in her heart, but in their eyes. She wasn't the weak link anymore. She was a leader. The canyon roared with the fury of the flood, its waters clawing at the rocks like a living beast. Though the hikers had been reached, the hardest part still lay ahead, getting them out alive. Rescue was never just one act of bravery. It was a relentless chain of decisions, each one carrying the weight of lives. The high line they had rigged held steady, but the storm showed no sign of mercy. Sheets of rain blurred their vision, and every gust of wind threatened to throw them off balance. Mud slid beneath boots, ropes strained against anchors, and exhaustion gnawed at muscles. Captain Harris shouted above the chaos, his voice hoarse. "We'll move them in pairs. Keep the line tight." The team scrambled to organize, but uncertainty lingered. Two men argued over whether to double-check anchors or rush before the water rose further. Another fumbled with gear, his gloves slick with mud. Time ticked away, precious and unforgiving. Emily scanned the scene, her mind clear despite the storm hammering around her. She noticed things others didn't, the left anchor dipping slightly. Under strain, a teammate's carabiner improperly clipped, a hiker's harness too loose. Small errors that, in this environment, could become catastrophic. Without waiting for permission, she barked orders. "Reinforce that anchor. Double-check your clips. Tighten that harness before anyone moves." The men paused, startled by her sharp tone. For weeks, she had been the quiet one, the one they mocked. Now her voice carried a steadiness that cut through the noise, demanding obedience. For once, they didn't argue, they moved. The first pair of hikers clipped in, trembling with fear. Emily positioned herself on the line, guiding them step by step across the torrent. The current below snarled, surging violently, but she kept her focus razor-sharp. "Eyes forward," she told them firmly. "One step at a time. Don't look." Down. They obeyed, shuffling across until strong arms pulled them onto the ledge. Relief swept through the group, but there was no time to celebrate. The water was rising faster now, swallowing boulders whole. One of the rookies turned too, Harris shouting, "We'll never get them all out in time." Emily cut in before doubt could spread. We will. Stay on the system. Keep the line tight. Trust the knots. Her certainty steadied them. They didn't notice, but her fingers trembled every time she gripped the rope. Fear churned inside, her just as fiercely as theirs, but she had learned long ago that fear could be harnessed. It sharpened her senses, drove her precision. Pair after pair crossed, each one sapping more strength from the rescuers. The ropes creaked under strain, deer slipping in the mud, but Emily was everywhere at once, adjusting knots, hauling slack, steadying panicked hikers with her voice. She became the axis around which the operation turned, her presence a lifeline as tangible as the rope itself. Then disaster struck. One of the hikers, a teenage boy with wide, terrified eyes, froze halfway across the line. He clung desperately, refusing to move, the current below screaming for him to fall. "We're losing him," someone shouted. Emily's heart surged, but she acted before panic spread. Clipping in, she stepped onto the line and moved toward him. The rope swayed violently, her body soaked to the bone, but she forced her breath steady. When she reached him, she pressed her helmet close to his ear, her voice low and commanding. "Listen to me. You're not alone. I've got you. Look at me." The boy's eyes locked onto hers, trembling. "You can do this," she said firmly. "One step, just one. I'll be with you the whole way." Slowly, painfully, she coaxed him forward. Step by step, they crossed together, Emily shielding him with her body, absorbing the rope's strain as the current tore beneath them. When they finally reached the ledge, the boy collapsed into sobs, clutching her arm. Emily gave his shoulder a quick squeeze before turning back to the line. No time for comfort, not yet. The team watched in silence, their earlier doubts eroding with every action she took. They no longer questioned her commands, they followed them. She had become the gravity, pulling them together. But the storm wasn't finished. A fresh surge of water slammed into the canyon, shaking the anchors violently. One of the ropes slipped, slack snapping through the system. Shouts erupted. Anchors failing. Emily sprinted to the point, mud splashing under her boots. She dropped to her knees, hands working furiously to reinforce the knot. Her fingers, numb with cold, moved with mechanical precision, looping, tightening, securing. For a moment, the world shrank to rope and rock, each knot a heartbeat, each tug a breath. The anchor held. She leaned back, soaked and shaking, but refused to let fatigue claim her. "Get the next pair ready," she shouted. By now, even Harris grizzled. Stubborn Harris looked at her differently. He had led countless rescues, but tonight he had no illusions. This mission was being held together by the rookie they once dismissed. The last two hikers remained, both injured, unable to walk without help. The water surged higher, biting at the rocks where they stood. Waiting was no longer an option. Emily didn't hesitate. "We'll tandem them across. I'll take the first." Harris opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She clipped into the line again, secured the injured hiker to her harness, and stepped onto the rope. The added weight nearly dragged her sideways, the flood shrieking below, but she gritted her teeth and moved forward. Every muscle screamed. Her arms burned, her legs trembled, her lungs clawed for air, but her mind stayed sharp. One step, one knot, one life at a time. When they reached the far side, the team pulled the hiker to safety. Emily collapsed to her knees, gasping, her body on the verge of collapse. But when she lifted her head, her eyes were fierce. "Last one," she rasped. "Let's move." Together, they ferried the final hiker across, the storm howling its rage at being denied its prey. And when his boots touched solid ground, a collective shout of triumph rose from the team. The mission wasn't over. The climb out of the canyon still loomed, But the hardest part had passed. Against the storm, against the odds, against their own doubts, they had succeeded. And at the center of it all stood Emily Mudstreet, exhausted but unbroken. The same woman they had mocked in training, dismissed in the field, now carried their respect without asking for it. She hadn't demanded it. She had earned it, rope by rope, step by step, in the heart of the storm. For the first time, the team truly saw her not as a liability, not as an outsider, but as the leader who had kept them alive. The canyon was a battlefield. Rain continued to lash down in relentless sheets, lightning flashing across the sky in brilliant, violent streaks. The floodwaters had begun to surge again, clawing at rocks, sweeping away loose debris, turning familiar paths into treacherous rivers. Emily and the team stood on the narrow ledge, soaked to the bone, muscles trembling from exertion. Their rescued hikers huddled together, shivering and terrified, while the team tried to maintain a semblance of order. The first challenge was obvious: retreat. Moving back toward the trailhead meant navigating the same hazardous terrain, now even more unstable. Rocks had loosened, the mud thickened, and branches floated dangerously through the torrent below. Every step demanded caution, yet time was critical. The canyon was still alive, dangerous, unpredictable. Harris barked instructions, but the team was fraying at the edges. Fatigue showed in trembling hands, sloppy knots, and anxious glances at the surging water. One of the hikers panicked, slipping in the mud and nearly toppling backward into the current. The rope system saved him, but the tension in the group skyrocketed. Shouts, scrambling, and frantic energy threatened to throw them all off balance. Emily stepped forward. Her voice cut through the chaos, clear and commanding. "Stop, everyone. Listen to me. One step at a time. Eyes forward. Trust the knots. We move together." For a moment, the storm's noise seemed to fade. The team froze, their panicked energy redirected into her rhythm. She had become the axis, the center of order amid the torrent. She quickly assessed the terrain. A ledge higher up on the east wall offered more stable footing and a safer path to the exit. Her mind raced through every detail she had studied. In training, anchor points, rope tension, not placement, the angle of the slope. Every step had to be precise, every decision deliberate. "We'll move in pairs," she instructed, her tone firm. "I'll guide the first group, then Harris takes the next. Stay clipped in at all times. No rushing. Mistakes will get us killed." The team obeyed, though doubt lingered in their eyes. They had learned to survive storms before, but Emily's calm authority gave them something new: confidence. She clipped herself to the high line first, her body heavy with fatigue and rain-soaked gear. Each movement was deliberate, balancing, her weight against the rope's tension, her boots sliding slightly on slick rock. One hiker followed her, trembling, gripping the rope like a lifeline. She placed her hands on his shoulders, steadying him. "I've got you. Trust me. One step. That's all." Step by step, they moved across, the water roaring beneath them. Like a beast ready to strike, Emily's focus narrowed. The storm existed only in the background. The rope and the hiker in front of her were everything. Halfway across, a surge of water hit the ledge beneath them. Rocks shifted violently, sending mud spraying. The hiker panicked, nearly twisting himself loose. Emily reacted instantly, bracing herself, gripping the line tighter, and pressing him against her. "Steady. One step." "You're safe," she said, her voice unwavering. The others watched, realizing she had become more than just a peer. She was the stabilizing force they hadn't known they needed. After the first group reached safety, she went back for the remaining hikers, repeating the process. The rope creaked, the anchors groaned, but her attention never wavered. Every knot, every handhold, Every movement was calculated. She had spent months mastering these tiny details in training, often mocked for being slow or overly cautious. Tonight, those details were saving lives. Meanwhile, one of the rookies slipped while adjusting the rope. Emily reacted instantly, yanking him back to solid footing. "Check your clips." "Eyes forward," she commanded, her voice cutting through fear. The young man nodded, shaken, but obeyed without argument. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity as the team methodically ferried each hiker up the safer ledge. Rain poured, muscles burned, and cold seeped into every joint. But Emily's determination never faltered. She spoke in short, clear commands, using her voice as a tool as much as her hands or the rope. Finally, all the hikers reached the higher ledge. Relief washed through the group, but the work wasn't done. The canyon climb to the trailhead remained dangerous, and the flood was still rising. Emily scanned the path, plotting the safest sequence for descent. She accounted for loose rocks, hidden mud pits, and branches floating downstream that could knock someone off balance. "Listen carefully," she said, addressing both her team and the hikers. "We move slowly. Everyone follows my lead. Don't rush. If you fall behind, wait, don't panic. We're almost out." As they climbed, she stayed at the front, checking every foothold and adjusting ropes as needed. Every time someone stumbled, she was there to steady them. The hiker from before, the one who nearly slipped into the flood, kept close to her side. Trusting her implicitly, the flood tried to make them falter. Water sprayed in sheets, the wind whipped rain sideways, and the canyon seemed intent on swallowing them whole. But Emily kept moving, each step deliberate, each instruction precise. Her calmness radiated outward, stabilizing the team and even the hikers. Halfway up, one of the veterans paused, muttering, "I've never seen anyone like her." His voice was almost awestruck. The others fell silent, too exhausted and too relieved to argue. By the time they reached the top of the canyon, rain still pouring, mud thick underfoot, every member of the team and all the hikers were alive. Exhaustion hit them in waves. Some collapsed onto the rocks, shivering and soaked, muscles screaming. Emily allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, mud dripping from her hair and face, water soaking her uniform. Harris approached, rain dripping from his grizzled beard. He studied her, his expression unreadable, then finally said, "You kept them together. You held the line when the rest of us were ready to crumble." Emily shook her head. "We did it together," she replied quietly. But inside, she felt the truth. This was the moment her preparation, patience, and persistence had truly paid off. The months of ridicule, the endless nights of studying knots and maps, the injuries and fatigue, they had all led to this. The hikers were safe. Her team was safe. And Emily had discovered something about herself that no drill or lecture could teach. Leadership wasn't about strength or speed. It was about presence, calm, and unwavering focus when everything else threatened to collapse. As they finally made it back to the station, rain still pelting down, the mood had shifted. No one mocked her. No one doubted her. The respect was silent but unmistakable. She didn't need words. Her actions had spoken louder than any cheers ever could. Emily collapsed against the wall of the station, exhausted but alive, knowing that the storm had tested more than just her body. It had tested her resolve, her mind, and her ability to lead. And she had passed. By the time the team returned to the station, the storm had not fully passed, but the immediate danger was over. Rain still pounded the roof, and puddles formed on the asphalt outside, reflecting the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles. Inside, the team was silent at first, dripping water and mud across the floor, their exhaustion palpable. Emily leaned against the wall, soaked and shivering, muscles screaming from hours of climbing, hauling, and steadying panicked hikers. She could feel every ache and bruise, every blister, every tendon stretched to its limit. And yet the adrenaline still hummed faintly beneath her skin, keeping her alert. Harris moved among the team, checking equipment, taking quick stock of injuries, and issuing instructions for cleanup. The survivors, huddled together on benches, were quiet but grateful, wrapped in blankets and trembling from cold and shock. Emily stayed back, watching, allowing others to take the lead with the immediate post-rescue tasks. Her mind, however, remained alert, still replaying the mission. Every movement, every decision, every rope knot. For weeks, her peers had underestimated her. They had mocked her in training, whispered about her weight, her height, her perceived slowness. Tonight, all that had changed, though no one said it aloud. The shift was subtle, a glance of respect, a nod, a hesitant silence where there would have been laughter before. Marcus, the recruit who had always watched her quietly, approached, eyes wide with awe. "Emily, you kept us alive," he stammered. I don't even know how you did it." Emily shook her head slightly, exhausted but calm. "We all kept each other alive," she said softly. Her voice was tired, yet there was a strength in it that drew attention. The other team members were processing the same realization. The ones who had doubted her every step of the way now recognized that she had been the anchor. Without her, the operation could have failed. And unlike her teammates, she hadn't sought credit. She hadn't boasted. She had led quietly, methodically, through the storm. The captain finally approached her, his face lined with rain and sweat, eyes serious. "Carter," he said, "I've led more rescues than I can count, but tonight, you held us together. You didn't panic. You saw what the rest of us missed. You acted when we hesitated." Emily's chest tightened, fatigue mingling with the faintest hint of pride. She had been trained for this, yes, but never imagined this level of responsibility so soon. Her preparation, her endless nights of study and practice, had been the difference between life and death. And yet, she felt no need to revel in it. Duty, not pride, had driven her. A veteran firefighter, one of the men who had mocked her early on, approached slowly. His boots squelched in the wet floor. I guess I was wrong about you," he admitted quietly. "You weren't the weak link. You were the strongest of us all." Emily gave a small nod, acknowledging the words without gloating. She had learned long ago that respect earned quietly carried more weight than praise shouted loudly. The team began to gather around her, some hesitant, some eager, all wanting to process the shared relief and the recognition of her leadership. Questions about her knots, her strategy, and her quick decisions started circulating, not as criticisms, but as curiosity. They wanted to understand what she had done. Emily explained calmly, showing how she had assessed anchor points, calculated rope tension, and coordinated the movement of hikers in pairs. She illustrated the critical decisions that had kept the line secure when panic threatened to unravel. The operation. Each explanation was precise, clear, and rooted in experience, showing not only her knowledge, but her ability to communicate it under pressure. As the team absorbed her words, the room shifted. Laughter returned, but it was different. Now respectful, tinged with admiration. The previous hierarchy, based on strength and bravado, had been replaced by a hierarchy of skill, calm, and decisive action. The rescued hikers, now wrapped in blankets and drying off, watched the exchange with wide eyes. Some of them sought Emily out, trembling but grateful. One young woman, clutching her soaked jacket, said quietly, "Thank you. I don't think I would have made it without you." Emily smiled faintly, exhaustion lining her face. "You did the hard part," she said gently. "You stayed calm, trusted the system, and followed instructions. That's what saved you. Harris observed the interactions, pride evident in his weathered features. Carter, he said to her again, tonight you didn't just follow orders. You led. That's what makes a leader, seeing the big picture, keeping everyone together, and staying calm when everything around you is falling apart. Emily nodded silently. She had never sought the spotlight, never demanded recognition. Her goal had always been simple: to be ready, to act when needed. But now, her peers' acknowledgement felt like the culmination of every struggle, every insult, every grueling night of preparation. The team spent the next hour cleaning and checking gear, tending to minor injuries and debriefing. Emily moved among them, offering guidance where necessary, answering questions, and reinforcing safety procedures. Even those who had been skeptical followed her advice without hesitation. The dynamic had shifted irrevocably. She was no longer the rookie, the underdog, the one who might fail. She was the anchor, the calm center, and the team's de facto leader in action. As the night wore on, Emily finally found a quiet moment to sit. Mud clung to her uniform, hair plastered to her face, and every muscle screamed in protest. She leaned back, letting herself breathe. Her mind replayed the mission, the rapid decisions, the tense moments, the surges of water, and the trust the hikers and her team had placed in her. It was overwhelming, yet exhilarating. She realized that leadership wasn't about being the loudest or the strongest. It wasn't about earning admiration through words or gestures. Leadership was earned in moments like this, in the eye of the storm, when fear threatened to paralyze, and calm, precise action made the difference between life and death. For the first time, Emily felt completely seen. Not as someone who struggled, not as someone underestimated, but as someone who had proven her worth when it mattered most. By the time the team finally settled, the storm outside had begun to subside. Rain still fell, but the torrent had eased into a persistent drizzle. Exhausted but alive, the group reflected quietly on the night's events. Emily, though drained, knew she had passed a test far greater than any drill or simulation. She had led in chaos, and she had not faltered. Later, as the survivors were escorted to safety by other units, Emily remained behind with her team. The quiet respect they now held for her was unspoken, but it was palpable. Even those who had mocked her in training avoided the earlier jabs. They knew now that this was the person who could save lives, not just hers, but theirs too. Emily allowed herself a small smile. All the ridicule, the doubt, the long nights alone, the injuries, they had led to this moment. And in that moment, she understood that her path was not about proving others wrong. It was about being ready when the world demanded it, and having the courage to step forward when it mattered most. As she finally changed into dry clothes and sat on the bench, exhaustion overwhelming her, she felt a deep satisfaction. She had not just survived, she had led. And in doing so, she had earned something far more enduring than praise: the trust and respect of those she had saved and those who had saved alongside her. The realization settled quietly in her chest. This was only the beginning. Challenges would come again. Disasters would strike. But Emily knew now that she had the strength, not just in body, but in mind and spirit, to face them and to guide others through them. Tonight, the storm had tested her, and she had risen to the occasion. And that knowledge, more than anything, would carry her forward. The sun rose slowly over the station, spilling gold across wet asphalt and mud-streaked walls. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet stillness, a calm that felt almost surreal after the chaos of the night before. Birds cautiously began their calls. Water dripped from eaves, and the floodwaters that had threatened lives now receded, leaving only traces of destruction and debris. Inside the station, The team moved with quiet efficiency, checking equipment, drying gear, and tallying supplies. There was a noticeable shift in energy-less exhaustion, more purpose, and an unspoken reverence for the rookie who had guided them through the worst of the storm. Emily entered the main room, still wet, hair plastered to her face, boots caked in mud. She moved toward her locker, changing quickly into dry uniform pants and a jacket, but the team's eyes followed her. There was a quiet awareness among them, a respect that didn't need words. She had earned it the night before, in the torrent. And chaos, through actions, not boasts. Harris approached, his steps deliberate. "Carter," he said, voice steady, "you've shown every one of us what leadership looks like. Not by shouting, not by being the loudest, but by knowing what needs to be done and doing it when it matters most." Emily nodded, still catching her breath. "I only did what I had to," she replied softly. But even she felt the weight of his acknowledgement, a validation that years of training, ridicule, and quiet perseverance had led to something real. Over the next several days, the story of the flash flood rescue spread through the unit and neighboring stations. Emily's name became synonymous with calm under pressure, precision, and decisive leadership. The same team that had mocked her skill, her size, her dedication, now looked to her for guidance in drills and fieldwork alike. Their laughter during training had shifted, to not mocking, but friendly, tinged with respect. One afternoon, as Emily helped a group of new recruits with rope drills, a young woman, wide-eyed and nervous, hesitated before her first knot. Emily knelt beside her, hands steady as she demonstrated. "Keep calm," she said, voice gentle but firm. "Every knot counts. Every movement matters. You can do this." The recruit nodded, following her instructions carefully. Emily watched, patiently, offering encouragement when needed. This was familiar territory teaching, guiding, but now it came with authority, rooted in experience rather than theory. She had been mocked for this attention to detail in training, yet here it was saving lives and building confidence in others. Marcus, now a trusted colleague, observed from nearby. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. "Not just in skill, but in how you lead. People listen to you now." Emily smiled faintly. "I didn't come here to be listened to," she said. "I came here to be ready. If I'm ready, then maybe others can be, too." The team continued to face emergencies, fires, medical calls, rescues in treacherous terrain, but Emily's reputation ensured that her voice carried weight. Her calm authority, her meticulous preparation, and her quiet courage set a standard that even the most experienced firefighters began to follow. Months later, during a training review, Harris gathered the unit for a debrief. He looked across the faces of his team, landing briefly on Emily. "This unit has faced some of the toughest challenges," he began, "and we've had moments where decisions meant life or death. Last year, one recruit showed us all that leadership isn't about strength or size. It's about clarity, calm, and the courage to act." Emily Carter stepped forward. Emily felt a wave of disbelief. The unit had never formally recognized her before. She stepped forward, posture straight but humble. The team's applause was steady, sincere, and carried a weight she hadn't felt before. Her peers, those who had once doubted or mocked her, looked at her with respect and admiration. "You kept us alive in conditions that would have broken most of us," Harris continued. "You led with your mind, your heart, and your hands. Every future recruit, every firefighter who follows, can learn from how you handle pressure, responsibility, and fear." The words settled heavily in Emily's chest. She had never sought recognition, but this acknowledgement wasn't about pride. It was about proving that perseverance, attention to detail, and quiet dedication could overcome any obstacle, even ridicule, even doubt. Later that evening, as Emily walked through the now quiet station, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The months of training where she had been mocked, the nights spent alone practicing knots and studying terrain maps, the exhaustion, the bruises, the moments of doubt, all had been necessary. They had forged not just her skill, but her character. She paused near the training room, where new recruits practiced rope techniques. She watched quietly as a young man struggled with a knot, frustration evident in his movements. Emily approached. Crouching beside him, her hands steady as she corrected his form. "Focus on the detail," she said softly. "Precision matters. Rushing leads to mistakes. One knot, one step, one decision at a time." The boy nodded, eyes wide, absorbing the instruction with seriousness. Emily felt a surge of pride, not for herself, but for the possibility she had ignited in someone else. Leadership, she realized, wasn't just surviving storms. It was preparing others to face them too. That night, Emily returned to her quarters, body exhausted, but spirit alive. She reflected on her path, the mockery in training, the doubts of her peers, the grueling preparation, the flood rescue, the quiet acknowledgement of her leadership. Each moment had led here. She had transformed from the one who was underestimated to the one who others relied upon, whose calm, clear actions in the storm had saved lives. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "We're lucky to have you leading us. Don't forget it." She smiled faintly, typing a quick reply. "I won't, but remember, we're all lucky to work together. Stay ready." In the quiet of the night, Emily finally allowed herself to rest. The storm outside had long passed, leaving behind only puddles, mud, and the faint scent of wet earth. Inside her, though, there was something enduring, a calm, quiet confidence that no ridicule, no doubt, no challenge could shake. She had faced the storm, and she had led. And in that moment, Emily Carter understood something essential. Leadership isn't given. It's forged in trials, proven in action, and earned quietly through courage, preparation, and the relentless determination to do what's right when it matters most. Tomorrow, there would be more emergencies, more training, more storms, both literal and figurative. But Emily knew she was ready. She had earned her place, and she would continue to guide, protect, and lead those who followed her. The journey from the mocked rookie to the leader who saved lives had reached its crescendo. And though she had earned recognition, Emily understood the deeper truth. The real reward was knowing she could rise in the face of fear, stay calm when others faltered, and lead not for praise, but because it was the right thing to do. And that knowledge, more than any medal, any commendation, or any applause, would carry her through every challenge to come.